For over 40 years, Rogers Communications Vice Chairman Phil Lind was the right-hand man to Canadian entrepreneur legend Ted Rogers, growing Rogers Communications from a startup to a telecom giant. We sat down with him to get his take on a number of issues facing Canadians, the economy, and the global economy, in part such as whether or not the Canadian government should allow Huawei's 5G technology in Canada. We started our conversation by Phil explaining what it was like for a Canadian company to work in the United States.
In the States, I managed to get a first impression about how Canadians are viewed in America. And, they like Canadians, but they don't really think they don't take us that seriously. We're little, and, and they're big. And so it helped me in the company a lot in the States when we went into the States, because I already knew more or less what they were thinking of us. And I knew that we had to out-American them, because otherwise, if we rode up as Canadians,
How do you do that? What do you think is the difference, and why did that? What was it specifically that you learned that enabled you to then attack it in the right way to be successful?
It's really Americans are tougher, and are more assertive in every way than we are, and they're less forgiving. So you have to proceed that way, otherwise you'll be run over. And that's what has happened to Canadians until recently, until the banks. United States has been a graveyard for Canadian companies overall, because they just haven't been able to cut it down there.
And I know that that's one of your focuses. You have a fund dedicated to, I think, helping Canadians understand what it's really like to work in America, just so that they can be successful. Tell us a little bit about how that actually operates and works.
Well, it isn't really that complicated. We just import Americans into UBC, which is where this thing goes on, and they hear firsthand how Americans think and talk. And I mean, we think we know everything about the States, and we know a hell of a lot, a hell of a lot more than they know about us. But we don't really know how tough things are.
How tough they are. Yeah. Pretty tough,
Yeah.
But
that's all right. They're tough, so we can be tough too.
Right, and so you just try to really make these people, the students or whoever, understand that this is the way it's going to operate.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
I know when you were here last, speaking with Amanda, I don't know that you had a view on President Trump at that time. So much has happened right now, and we're all really waiting to see how China-U.S. tensions unfold, and also whether or not we actually get this new NAFTA USMCA deal signed, ratified. What is your view now on President Trump, if I may ask?
I've never been a fan of Trump's, never. But I think that, the new trade deal is almost the same as the last one, a little less for us perhaps, but he's gone through these, putting everyone through these terrible machinations for not very much. I mean, that's his style, He wants to take anything he can and shred a little bit off it for the outsiders, add a little bit for Americans, and say, look at what I did. And I don't know. But I think the trade deal will pass, both in Parliament and in Congress.
Okay. What do you think of his views towards Huawei? That has changed as well since you were last here.
Well,
and it's interesting that Rogers has chosen Ericsson, not Huawei. What do you make of the...
Well, Ericsson has always been our partner. Huawei is cheaper and quite sophisticated, but the fact is they're very, very close to the Chinese government. So for anyone to argue that they're not, that they wouldn't be compromised if the government said do this,
Okay.
they do it. They have to do it. They're in that country. So the idea of Huawei controlling our or potentially controlling our communication system in Canada is crazy. I mean, I don't think they should be allowed to.
And it's still being determined in terms of whether or not they can roll out 5G in Canada.
The government, yeah, is still.
And so your advice to the Canadian government would be, because they say they're looking at the facts. You say the facts are
Pretty evident. Pretty evident. I mean, and you know, the woman in Meng in Vancouver. I mean, why does the Chinese government get so excited about this? Why? Because they're very, very close to Huawei.
Understood. Well, we can also then perhaps understand, too, why President Trump and the Democrats, there's bipartisan support for this.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if it was just President Trump, that's one thing. But if you've got Democrats as well saying no deal, then I think we've got to listen. We should listen.
Okay, because a lot of people are really trying to figure out what are the facts versus what is just a political. Yeah. Speaking of politics and trade tensions, how do you think the U.S.-China trade tensions will play out? What do we need to know? Because we're watching this every day in the markets, Phil.
It's going to be very difficult. It's going to be a long, long struggle because I think the U.S. is right about this. I mean, China is abusing the trade system, mainly because it copies or and then does it themselves a lot cheaper. We do all the thinking, and they do the manufacturing and bring it back into. When I say we, I mean the United States and Canada. So I think they're right to fight. I think Trump's right to fight this, but it's going to be a long one.